Hi everyone, my name is Lorenzo and I'm a senior software engineer at Microsoft, where I work on React Native, of which I've been a maintainer for almost 6 years at this point. Welcome to my first ever YouTube video. I'm very excited to be here, I'm a little scared, I'm not gonna lie, and I hope it's gonna turn out fine. So I know what you're thinking, probably like, who's this random guy, why should I care about this video? You probably already jumped out if you weren't interested, so bye. But today, I want to talk about a very important but yet rarely discussed topic, which is mental health in the tech industry. And luckily, I found a victim to help me out in this first ever attempt at something. I'm very happy to welcome here Roberto.
Hi, thank you for having me here. I'm Roberto, and I worked as a web security engineer at Google for 5 years, and I used to be a consultant before that. And yeah, I can say I'm a victim of many things, one of which is not caring about my mental health. So yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that like we really connected about when we first interacted with each other is like a fellow software engineer that cares about their mental health and is willing to speak up. And what better time to speak up about mental health than now, especially because in a few days from this recording, and if everything goes well, like you're gonna see this video on October 10th, which is World Mental Health Day. And the theme of this year is literally like mental health is a right for everyone. So we really hope that us having a chat about mental health, about the challenges that we face, can help you, start your own journey in mental health. There are many myths and taboos around mental health at work. Of course, we can't really address these problems unless we open about them. We talk openly, and we really hope that this video will help you like spark a discussion with some of your colleagues or like even just with yourself. If there's one key message that we want you to take out of this is that your mental health matters, and it matters just as much as your tech skills. Anyway, let's jump into it. So this is how it's gonna work. A few weeks back, I asked on various socials to friends and followers to submit anonymous questions that they have about software engineering, mental health, and open source. Today, me and Roberto are going to go through those questions and we will attempt to reply to all of them based on our experiences over the years, like having dealt with burnouts, things like imposter syndrome, work-life balance, and luckily for both of us, we both have had a therapist. And so we really hope that all of this can help somehow give you some insights into our own experience. But of course, please remember this. We're not therapists. We are software engineers first and people that care about their mental health second. If anything that we say resonate with you, please consider learning more on your own and on reaching out to actual professionals in the mental health field. Right now in 2023, sorry, there are so many ways that you can reach out to, professionals that it should be relatively easy for you. We hope that it's gonna be easy for you to start your own journey and learn more about this. We're gonna also have some links in the video description to help with that. Now, without further ado, I talked enough. Let's jump into this by having me talk a bit more. Okay, let's start with question one. Question one, of course, we don't know who sent them, so we're gonna try to say the they, them as a pronoun just to keep it safe. So here we go. If I notice that I started to do work slower, is this the bell that I need a rest? But when I'm on vacation, I feel guilty that I need to learn and try new things. How do you manage your time? I think this is a great question because despite it sounding kind of like simple on the surface, it can be cut in many different ways. To me, the first aspect that comes out of this question is this sense of guilt. First off, try to ask yourself, where is this sense of guilt coming from? If I had to take a bet, it's probably because you mostly consume tech content. On Twitter, you follow tech influencers, quote unquote. On YouTube, you only see people doing live codes or like people talking about their latest startup side project. And that can really affect your mental health. Like if you feel that you're surrounded by people that are constantly pushing, like what we would also call like the hustle culture, that is probably like one of the main reasons why you might feel the sense of guilt. I think that a better way of approaching your work is to think of your work as something that you do, but is not your own life. Like it's not everything. So yes, in a way, if you start working slower, probably it is a bell that you need to rest, but you shouldn't feel guilty for resting. There's an entire industry that is built about making you feel guilt, because that way, if you feel guilt about something, you will buy their course to improve your skills. You will get better because they're trying to make you feel like you're not enough, but most times you are enough. What you could do, and then I also want to hear what Roberto says, is probably like start by cutting off these sources of guilt. So maybe social media, like follow less people, or like don't open certain socials when you're on holidays, and try to understand that rest is an important part of an healthy balance, and that is what will make you better in the long run.
I I agree with you, and I would like to add something even maybe a stronger opinion in the same direction. Like,
That's why we're here.
yeah, exactly. The first vacation that I really enjoyed since I started working was the vacation that I took 1 month after quitting Twitter. Like, I took a complete hiatus off Twitter for a month and then I went on vacation. Because if you just do it when you are on vacation, you're still attached and addicted to that dopamine hit of scrolling through people telling you how much better you can become with these 10 simple tricks. So I would suggest to prepare for your vacation. Well, first, take them, please. Like, do yourself a favor. You cannot be a good software engineer if you are running on fumes. No machines and no humans can work without the proper fuel. And we as humans are fueled on rest. Like, we need to spend 1/3 of our time sleeping, and that's not a random, there's a reason for that. And that is also true for our focus. Don't risk ruining your ability to focus or to enjoy what you do, because that happened to me. Don't push it too hard, because you will eventually have scars. You will leave scars on your ability to focus, on your ability to keep in mind what matters, or when you're writing code, to keep in mind the stack of things that you're doing without missing pieces and bits. Because I don't know about you all, but if you write hard code, like code that is hard to write, it's super hard to keep in mind what you're doing. And if you're not rested, you will miss pieces, you will miss edge cases, you will implement bugs, not features, and might as well just throw it away sometimes instead of keep writing it. So take your vacations, prepare for your vacation. So start cutting off social media before you go on vacation. Tell your colleagues that you're not going to be there that week, maybe 2 weeks in advance, so that they can prepare to accommodate for your needs. Because there is, like, a vacation is not a vacation if when you come back you have to catch up on what happened for an entire couple of weeks, like catch up on all emails, have backlog when you come back. So prepare for your vacations, cuddle them, cuddle yourself. And yeah, with regards to the guilt feeling, it doesn't really matter if it comes from social media or for your education, maybe your parents. I don't know about your life story, but definitely think about it this way. Guilt is an important feeling in life because it is what keeps us part of a group. Guilt is like implemented in our brain to make us behave according to the norm, so that you don't like make too much of a damage for the group that you belong to. If guilt is telling you to do something, but that doesn't benefit anyone in the group, that guilt is misplaced. Like, that emotion is not giving you a signal that is worth listening to. That is what guilt is for. So if it's not doing its job, it's meaningless. So just stop. And I know that feeling very well. So believe me, it's hard to stop listening to it, but it's important that you learn how to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also wanted to go back 1 second because I think it's also a good jumping point to then maybe get to the second question, but the point about sleep and the fact that we are similar to like our smartphones, our laptops, we have a battery. We have a certain level of energy that we burn through in a day. And when I was younger, I used to think like, especially when I was in uni, I used to think, oh, well, even if I sleep 3 hours, like when I wake up, my battery will be at 100% again. And only much later in life, like after I moved to London, I realized that if I go to sleep on like 3% battery and I sleep for 5 hours, when I wake up, my battery will be like a 50%. And if I think that I have 100% of my battery available when it's actually only 50, then that is where like things like my, I work slower, my brain starts messing up more. Like we really need to start thinking about rest as not like a reset point, but like something more organic. Like it directly benefits you the better your sleep is. And it's probably like one of the bigger hacks that you can do to improve your well-being is like taking care of your sleep. There are a lot of like apps right now. There's a lot of like devices like the Apple Watch, the Oura Ring, and similar devices that track your sleep. That's probably a great starting point. If one way to really like improve your well-being is like, okay, let's take care of my sleep first, and then build on top of that to get the other benefits and like the other habits and things that you can improve on.
If I may jump in, I am an insomniac, so I had to find several tricks to fix my sleep schedule. And two suggestions that I can give, very short ones. The first one is find the right hours to sleep in. Because for me, for example, if I sleep between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., is much better than sleeping between midnight and 8 a.m. So same amount of sleep, but if it is in the right hours, for me is much more effective. So try to switch your schedule a bit, just a couple of hours at a time. Give yourself time to adjust, because at the point you will be slightly jet lagged. So consider that the first day is not gonna feel good, but find the right time to sleep in. And also caffeine. Try to go like 9 days without caffeine, which is more or less the amount of time your brain takes to start reconnecting to your adenosine receptors. About 9 days. If you can go 9 days without caffeine and you notice a change in your sleep patterns, you should probably stay without it. And I love coffee. I can't have it anymore because of this reason. So also consider that substances like THC, caffeine, and alcohol can really mess with your sleep schedule.
Yeah, there was actually a video that I was watching the other day from one of the YouTubers that will probably like leave in the description section in the notes, which is Ali Abdal. I think it's his name. It's like a GP, so a medic that turned into a content creator now on YouTube full time. And he was talking about this great rule, which is like the 3-2-1 rule. So 3 hours before sleep, you should stop eating. 2 hours before sleep, you stop drinking anything. And 1 hour before sleep, you should stop staying in front of a screen. And as a way to ease your body into going to sleep better. And yeah, like things like caffeine, I also stopped basically having any caffeine, especially after 2 p.m. Now I have an hard rule: after 2 p.m. I don't have any caffeine, because I know that it will like literally mess with my brain. And because I track it, I can see the days where I have alcohol in the evening, where I have caffeine in the
Right.
afternoon. Like those are the days that like you can see it. Like once you have some benchmarks and some data, you're like, I can see it where it went wrong and I know why. Like this feedback loop should make it easier.
Yeah, I agree, especially considering that caffeine has a half time of 6 hours. That means that if you drink an espresso like after lunch, 6 hours later, you will have half an espresso in your blood, still going on, still running through your veins, and you're probably going to go to sleep 6 hours later or something like that, which means a quarter of an espresso is still there, and you're trying to get to sleep. Is that something you want to do? Maybe not. So time it well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was one of the things that when I learned, I was like, okay, I did my calculation. It's like, okay, 2 p.m. is my cutoff time. But yeah, so before we jump to the next question, I also wanted to like make one thing clear. We're not saying you should never like learn new things or like have a side project. It's more like don't do it out of guilt because someone else is trying to force you into feeling guilt. Try to find the right spot, the right balance of like learning new things, having a side project. So in a way, going back to your manage your time proper question, first I would say get to a state where you're feeling better, and then try to creating like only modify your routine slightly to introduce some of these changes. Don't like, okay, from Monday, I'm gonna start working 1 hour every evening on my side project. That is like a goal that is gonna be very hard to achieve. And the moment that you're gonna realize that you're failing at that, you will actually feel worse. And maybe you will have like, you will start drinking more caffeine, you will have more alcohol in the evening, and that will disrupt more your sleep patterns. And then you will feel like less rested, and then it keeps going, and it's gonna get worse over time. So what you want to try to do is try to introduce slowly and little by little and in a very sustainable pace new behaviors, new habits in a routine to get to the point where like you have time to learn new things or have a side project in a more healthy way.
Yeah, also on the side projects note and life changes note, I would like to add two small points. First one is any change, even positive ones, should be taken alone. Like if you quit drinking alcohol, which is something that I did, for example, just do that. Don't start a diet the same way. You're gonna fail. Like you have a certain amount of energy that you can put into changing your life for the better or the worse, or adding more things to do or stuff like that, or even rest more. Do it one at a time, because if you change everything, like you start going to the gym, you stop drinking alcohol, and you do everything all together, the toll on your mind is going to be too high. Like if you are, especially if you are a person that likes their habits, you are not going to be able to change all of them at once. And second, with regards to side projects, the way our brain processes satisfaction is has an inverse proportion with the time you invest in it. So if you start working on a project, you're going to have a lot of enjoyment in the first few hours. And then the more you go on with the project, the less interesting it's going to become. It's going to become more and more hard to keep working on it. And that is okay. That is fine. It's normal. You're not just a person that gets bored really quickly and abandons all of their projects. I do that all the time. Like I think I have 86 projects, 4 of which I have finished. It's fine. Like if a side project is something that you do to learn, focus on that. If when you have learned enough, you can abandon it. No one is watching you. You are your own manager. Like nothing depends on that side projects. And if instead you want to finish it, then try to find a way to make it part of your schedule. Like make it a habit. Don't make it something that you do out of guilt anytime you have free time. That's gonna kill you. Like it's gonna destroy you.
Yeah, and I think that all of these tips are really, really good as a starting point for the next question. So let's go into that. And the question is, how do you prevent burnout? And then in parentheses, I am from Ukraine, so so it's become little complicated to manage things because of war in country and curfew there.
Like I find this interesting because I appreciate the fact that the wording here is it's become a little complicated to manage things in a country that is at war. That is an understatement if I've seen one. Like
Yeah, definitely.
this is already a question that per se makes me realize that maybe this person is trying to underestimate the problem that they're going through. If you are in a situation that is as stressful as a war, which I've not been, and I cannot even really imagine what that means, take care of yourself. Like in those situations, like that's enough stress to be in a burnout per se, even if you don't have a job. So how to prevent burnout in that situation, that is hard to answer, to be honest. We can give general tips on how to treat yourself better and maybe make it harder to burn out. But if your situation in life, for example, having a relative that is really sick or having a war going on or all of this situation, or being in a country that has problem like provisioning for food, those life-threatening situations or like mental health threatening situations, those are very hard to deal with. And your physical health should come first. if it's hard for you to take care of yourself or the people that you care about, there is no special recipe that we can provide. That is going to be hard, full stop. But we can give some tips on how to treat yourself better, at least at work. So, Lorenzo, if you want to start off with some tips, I will add some later.
Yeah, so I also wanted to plus one what you just said, like don't underplay what you're going through just because like you're I'll make a bold assumption. You're probably a white male, and if you're a white male, you've been told that you need to, boys don't cry. You're not supposed to, listen to your emotion. You're not supposed to show that you can be in pain. So you're being trained to like underplay any bad thing that happens to you. And I think that this is a situation where you should fully accept, and like I hope that us telling you this may help you, like accept that yes, it's hard and it sucks, and it's okay that you feel stressed and you feel negative emotions about it. It's okay. It's a war, for fuck's sake. It's not something like, oh, I went to the supermarket and they finished the toilet roll. That's a little more complicated. Like it's a big deal. It's a problem, and it's totally understandable that you feel negative emotions. You feel things in your chest, maybe. Like it's okay to feel things and not underplay them. So that's the first thing I wanted to like underline a bit more. The other thing I wanted to say is that in these type of situations, it's very easy to define burnout. Burnout, basically, if we look at it from like a neurological perspective, is basically situations where you're stressed for much longer that your body has been programmed to be. Basically, stress is supposed to be like a very like quick reaction to something that happens quickly. Like you see a tiger, your body like fills your body with chemicals so that you feel this stress response and you can like run away. If you're forced to stay next to the tiger for many, many hours, it's your body kind of like is not good at living in that state. That's supposed to be a very high, quick response to, get away from that dangerous situation. So burnout is one of the situations where your body is in a prolonged phase of stress. And sometimes you cannot do anything about it. And this is where I wanted to go. And now we can go through some of the tips maybe. Is that in this situation, the best thing you can do is, well, as we mentioned, like accept your situation and own your feelings, but also like focus on what you can control. So for example, maybe what you can do is like, okay, I know that 80% of my stress every day will come from this. At least I can make sure that I have my battery at 100% so that I have 20 that I have control over. So for example, what we were saying earlier about sleep may be something that could help you. Like if you can figure out ways to improve your sleep maybe a bit, that could help you like deal with the day-to-day situation a bit better and your day with a bit more battery left. And then, as we were saying, like focus on small incremental changes, because like one-off big swings, they usually fail. Like what you want to do is, there is this phrase that I've heard, and probably I'm going to repeat it wrongly, but the concept was you will fail at the level of your goals, but you will succeed at the level of your systems. So usually when we set a goal, the goal is something bold, something big. But then when we fail that, then we will feel bad. We will drop, our morale will drop. But if we create a system, that will basically be our safety net. So I'll do a super quick example. If my goal, if I want to stop drinking, I shouldn't set myself a goal, oh, I'm going to stop drinking from Monday, I will never drink again. Because eventually what could happen is that I will go out, I will have some alcohol in the home or something, I may end up drinking something, and then my goal is failed and I'm a failure, and then things start getting worse. If instead I have a good system, that will become easier. So for example, in this situation, if I don't keep alcohol at home, it's very unlikely that I will drink alcohol. Or like if I want to stop drinking caffeine, if I stop having caffeine in my house, there's no way I will like magically create caffeine out of the blue and drink caffeine. So a system is a way to make yourself live in a situation where basically the environment around you points you in the direction that you want to go. But yeah, these are just like some quick examples. There are some videos that I like that give more precise like things that you can do in your daily life to improve your well-being. I don't know, Roberto, is there anything that comes to mind?
Well, I have some tips, like some systems that I used myself. I can give some examples. Like this is not a comprehensive list and might not work for people, but like what I used to do was checkups. Like at the end of the day or at the end of the week, depending on how your brain works and what's a unit of work in your job, do a self checkup. Like take 10 minutes in which you have at the end have a statement on how you feel. Are you satisfied with what you do? Like, this is the question that I asked myself. Am I satisfied? Did I do something satisfying this week? This is very important because if you're not satisfied, stress is gonna be pointless. It's gonna feel much higher, needlessly higher maybe, because you're not doing something that you're supposed to do. Which brings me to the second tip, which is this framework, which is this an emergency? Like when you're doing something, ask yourself, what happens if I do nothing? In my previous team, we would sometimes work in emergency mode. Like some servers would start failing. Maybe throughput was too high for the things that we put in place, and we started putting out fires. And after a month, you work in firefighting mode, you're gonna fail. Like the tiger example that you gave is especially fitting in this case. So at one point, a colleague of mine and I stopped and said, okay, what happens if we do nothing? And we realized we were gonna lose some data. Data that was almost always repeated the next day, and that was not user data. Those were just logs. Like it wasn't important data that we were losing. And so we accepted, okay, if we accept to lose like 25% of data, how long does it take for us to fix the bugs? And that was like few hours. And we did that. And we accepted it. And for 3 weeks, we didn't touch that anymore. We accepted to lose some of the data. It was redundant data, extremely redundant data, and we were fine with it. So we realized that the emergency we were fighting was not an emergency. And that is important. And the last one that I have is like either delegate or reduce your work hours. It is fine to have someone else do your tasks. And it doesn't matter if you think they're gonna do it worse. Of course, if the project is yours, you know it better than anybody else. But perfect is the enemy of done. If you just want to do perfect things, you will burn out because as the project grows, well, you don't. You are still you. So if you want to have a finished product at the end, you should learn to delegate and sometimes work less. Like if you're going through a war or a hard time in your life, or like if there is someone next to you, let's say that you have a pregnant partner that is going through the worst period of their lives because they're sick every day. Take time. Maybe switch to 80%, 60%. Be there for them. That is more important. Like you can't pour from an empty cup, so keep your cup full. And this is more or less the list of tips that I had in my mind.
Yeah, and maybe an hidden one in this, like in these last two, is also like talk with people around you, because like when you delegate, when you want to reduce your working hours, I hope that the people around you in your work environment understand the situation you're in and like can somehow help you navigate this. Like if you talk to your manager like, hey, I have war at home, can we find a better balance so that I can, keep working for you? I think that an angle that you can also use is like, well, you're doing an investment of me right now. If you're reducing the working hours right now, you're helping me live through a rough period in my life, and I will not burn out. So I will not need to, leave this job or like take a 3 months leave because I cannot handle it anymore. So maybe an angle that you can use to, navigate a conversation with the peers around you, your manager, is also like, hey, this is an investment on me long term. So yeah, honestly, it's very hard. So I hope that some of these tips may help you. And yeah, like sadly, lives can be hard, and when it's hard, we should just acknowledge that it's hard, and not try to pretend that everything is fine.
Yeah,
But yeah,
I also have another addition. If your manager is cooperative, keep in mind that it's very convenient for them to care about you. Like, but if they're not cooperative, keep in mind that replacing you takes time. Someone new on the project takes, I don't know, from 3 weeks to 3 years to learn about the project. That time, the time that a newbie would take to get to your level, is time that you are allowed to bargain for. So if your manager is non-cooperative, they should always keep in mind, or you can remind them that replacing you is going to cost them, I don't know, 3 months. You can guesstimate how long it would take for someone new to get to know the project as much as you. And in that case, you can always say, okay, you will lose 3 months of work if you have to replace me. I'm asking you 3 weeks off. So offer them, bargain for a deal that works for you. I've been in situations in which the manager was not cooperating with me, but there are ways you can make yourself, your worth clear to your manager.
totally. And on this topic, I wanted to move to the next question, which is, maybe we should have put in this before, but oh well, as we said, perfection is the enemy of done. We're doing it, even if it's not going to be perfect. But yeah, the third question is, how can you spot a period of burnout when you should step back from software a bit, even though you love doing it all the time? So basically, this is like, how can we prevent burnout, even if we really like what we do? It's honestly a great question, and it kind of goes back to what we were trying to say earlier of like having an healthy balance. I think that a few signs that you're entering a burnout phase are something that, at least personally, I could feel physically in my body. Like, I could feel the stress. I could feel that my reactions to what was happening around me were different. That I was more in pain. I was more easily in anger. I would be more frustrated. And all of these things, now I know that these are signs like that my body gives me, that my brain kind of like short circuit me to go towards when I'm entering a burnout phase. I don't think we've touched on this, but basically both of us dealt with burnouts in the past. I usually say to people that I went through 1.5 burnout, because luckily the second time I kind of spotted these, these behaviors, these feelings early enough that I was able to course correct. I was already seeing a therapist by then, so I learned how to explain to myself what I was feeling. I learned how to label the things that I was feeling, and that really helped me see the pattern that like was driving me towards a burnout. So I would be, more prone to anger. I would feel like more stressed. I would feel jaded. I didn't like the people I was working with. I didn't like what I was doing. Like, usually the more negative feelings you find yourself having, the more likely is that you're going towards burnout. As you were saying, like, even if you're quote unquote loving coding all the time. And then, of course, there's the other angle, which is more like this sense of feeling drained, which kind of goes back to what we said earlier. Maybe you love coding. Maybe you grew up seeing movies where like the hacker was the guy that never slept and always drank energy drinks and kept going throughout the day. And so that's like what your brain recognizes as like, oh, I love this. This is the best thing ever. But your body is telling you a different story. So to me, like, how do you spot it? It kind of boils down to like check in with your feelings. And if you see a pattern of like negative feelings or like anger, sadness, being prone to not wanting to be around other people, even as an introvert, if you spot yourself deliberately avoiding people, avoidance usually is a sign of that. And also like how your body feels, if you feel tired, if you feel exhausted, that's another flag in my eyes. Roberto,
Yeah,
what do you think?
I agree with everything you said, and including the fact that I went through 1.5 burnouts. I would say that what helped me realize things the second time and stop beforehand were a series of questions I asked myself, like, does work or does your project affect your sleep schedule? Does it affect your diet? Does it affect the way you interact with your personal relationships, like your friends, your partner? Do they notice that you're stressed? And lastly, does it affect your relationship with your manager? Like, if any of these four questions, the answer is yes, like your partner noticed or your best friend noticed that you're more stressed than usual, or you're seeing them less than you would normally, then the answer is yes, take a step back. Like, if your health, physical health, so your diet and your sleep patterns or your physical activity are impacted by your job, or your personal relationships are impacted by your job, and lastly, if your personal relationship with someone at work, like your colleagues or manager, is impacted by your job or your projects, then you should think about it. I'm not saying you are definitely in burnout, but those are the early signs that made me realize it was time for me to take a sabbatical, for example. Now, the solution might not be taking a sabbatical. A sabbatical could be go on vacation, change projects, change team, or maybe just work a tiny bit less. Maybe, I don't know, 60, 80%, as I said earlier. Those are all good options, but do something if one of these shows up, because then the others are going to show up soon enough.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when you're not accustomed to dealing with burnout. Like the first time that comes around, usually by the time you realize that, oh no, I may be going into burnout, you're probably like this close to actually being burnout, and you're likely going to step it into it, fall into it, even if you're starting to, save yourself at that point. So really pay attention to these signs as early as you see them, as you perceive them, because usually most people, when they only realize they're in burnout while being in burnout. So you kind of want to avoid that being in burnout is really a bad place to be in. It feels awful, and usually also takes a super long time to get out of it. I think for me, the first time, it took me 3 months to fall into it, and then 3 to 4 months to get out of it. And I was feeling awful. When I was in burnout, it was one of the worst times I had in my early experience in London.
I agree. It was for me, it took me 3 months to go down the drain, and then it took me about 6 to be fully functional. Like, it took me 3 to go back to being a functional software engineer and a functional friend and a functional partner. But then enjoying those things took me 3 more months, because I restarted working before I was completely healed, and that made it significantly slower. Yeah, of course. And when I was in burnout, I couldn't work, so I had to take a few months off. So yeah, it's not a good deal to insist if you have some early signs of burnout. You're gonna pay it, and you're gonna pay it more than you would if you just took a break.
Totally. And I'm gonna use this. We've been talking about tips, specific things that one can do to deal, like with spotting burnout earlier, with dealing with actual burnout. The next question is actually about something slightly more precise, which is, what are your 3 best tips to feel better when remote teams workers begin to feel loneliness, depression, and perhaps even anger, frustration with feeling of isolation? Which is, I think, a great question, and let's dive into it because there's a lot of
Right.
say here.
So for me, this reminds me of the lockdown, because I've always worked in the office, at least most of my career, except for the lockdown times. And in that period of time, there were many things going on in my life, but the feelings described here, so loneliness, depression, and anger, frustration due to the isolation, those were all there. And one trick that I tried to suggest and apply was to simulate some things that you would only get in the office. For example, a colleague of mine and I started doing very long screen share sessions in which we pretended to be one next to the other sitting at a desk. So We did not talk the entire time, of course, but since I was watching his screen and he was watching mine, we could just sometimes just ask the other person, hey, how do you do these things? Or something like that. Or maybe have a casual chat, like, should we take a break? Do we want to get some tea? And we spent 10 minutes of break. If you are already in that phone call, it normalizes it. It makes it much easier to, break routine. You don't have to schedule a meeting to have a quick chat. You don't have to schedule a meeting to, just play some things together. It feels more like the office life and takes off some of the edge that you might be on. And the other thing that we tried to do was to schedule some chit chat time in which it was forbidden to talk about work with our colleagues. So all work topics were banned and we could only talk about other things. And that also helped me not just with the loneliness of remote work, but since we were a very distributed team and we used to have people in Sunnyvale, people in New York, people in Washington State, and in Europe in 3 different locations, 4 maybe. To unite the team a bit more, we would sometimes have meeting, one-to-one or one-to-many, in which we would not be allowed to talk about work. And I think this is something that can help because it is something that would happen in the office. Like, in the office, I don't know about you all, but if you chat with people, you're not just going to talk about work. Over coffee, you're going to talk about your life. And remote work tends to remove that part and enhances your detachment. And that's where anger or frustration might come in.
Yeah, absolutely. And similarly, that was going to be also my first tip for this question, which is like introduce in your company like remote first practices. There are companies that are remote only, and one example is like GitLab. They have their entire company handbook online, and one can read through it. And you can probably like get inspired by those to try and introduce more of these practices that make remote workers feel more part of the project or the office environment, because you kind of want to create the sense of camaraderie and you want people to feel that they have a relationship with each other. On this also, one other thing to say is also feel that you can speak up, and try to speak to your manager, speak to your peers, for a couple of reasons. First off, if you're feeling that, it's likely that you're not the only one feeling that, especially if unless it's a situation where you're the only remote worker, which it might be a bit harder than in that situation, which suggests talking directly with the manager. But if one or more of you are remote, it's likely that everyone is kind of keeping silent because they don't feel that other people might be feeling the same things, when usually these type of things are shared. So, speak up, propose these policies, these remote friendly activities that can help everyone feel that they're more connected together. Of course, loneliness, isolation, depression, these are phrases or words that we see usually connected to each other, and it's not just by chance. It's because usually it's like a spiral, because when you're feeling isolated, that makes you feel lonely, and when you feel lonely, you feel sad, and when you feel sad, that actually creates in your brain a series of mechanisms. It triggers a series of mechanisms that actually will make you go down a path of being more isolated, because when you're sad, you kind of shut down. If you think about even the Disney movies, the sadness is blue, is in the corner, doesn't talk with anyone. That's because it's literally the mechanisms that you have inside that is making you, be silent, be in the corner, be quiet. And that can then lead to further down the road to depression. So it's actually they're somewhat connected. So one other thing that you can do, and this is on top of the policies and speaking up with the other people about this, is focus on what you can control. It's something that I mentioned earlier. One suggestion I would have is if you're remote, try to take advantage of what you can do in your space. For example, one thing that I hear a lot that is a great suggestion and I should do more myself is go on mental health walks, which means go at least outside 15 minutes every day, have a walk. It sounds stupid, it sounds simple, but the sheer fact that you're outside helps your brain feel so much better. And you can even use that in partner with like having a call with another remote colleague and you go on the walk at the same time. Like, try to leverage the things that being remote gives you. So like you don't have a commute, maybe you can use the time to, exercise. That's another thing that maybe we didn't discuss earlier, but it's very good for your well-being in general. Or for example, you can more or less, usually when you're fully remote, you're given more like leveraging what your working hours are. So that should allow you, for example, well, I can start 1 hour later in the morning and I can use that hour to, I don't know, read a book or something, that some activity that will make you feel better, feel yourself like you will have more energy overall. Like there are things that will not directly solve the situation you're in if you don't have any control of it. But if what you can control is like, okay, I will start my job every day feeling a little bit better because I've done something that makes me feel better, that could help you endure through a phase. And maybe, at some point you will actually be able to speak up and with your manager, you'll figure out some better ways. So yeah, I think these are some tips. I hope that they can help. I don't know, Roberto, if there's any other final tips that you have for this
There
question.
are two things that came to mind while listening to you. The first one is speaking up. Like the question that you, and I'm not referring to you, Lorenzo, but the person who asked the question, that question, did you try asking it to your manager? It's like, we could give you answers, but probably the person that is best suited to answer and that can also change things for you is your manager or your team leader, like the person that can actually implement those changes. So asking a question is always allowed when it comes to you. Like asking a question for yourself, that's always allowed. So just go for it. And when it comes to mental health walks, I agree, fully agree. If you have a park nearby your house or you can reach a park, consider taking some of your meetings from there. Like the commute to the park, if it is less than 10 minutes, is sometimes worth to just go there and have one of your one-on-ones in the park. That of course you're gonna need a decent headset, but I'm pretty sure that if you work remote you already have one. So it's just a matter of taking the meeting from different space. Basically everywhere now you have decent reception, so consider just taking the meeting from outside and see some green, like some leaves, not a green ad on a wall, but like try to
Like
see some
gamers say,
plants.
touch grass.
Yeah, touch grass or something like that. I don't think anyone will be annoyed by you taking a meeting from a park. Like I've never seen that happen personally.
Unless you work on some super private secret project, but that's the very, very small chance that you're actually working on some of those. So you should be fine. And actually, while you were saying that, another thing came to mind, which is related again to speaking up. And that's like, and I just want to create awareness about this, but basically, your brain sometimes is not your best friend. And what I mean by that is that we have some circuitry in our brain that tends to fill the gaps. And this is sometimes working against us. So for example, and I'm referring especially to this like anger and frustration with the feeling of isolation, which is that sometimes maybe you're feeling that anger or frustration because your brain is saying, look at that, I'm isolated because these other people don't like me. When in reality, maybe it's completely not that, but your brain is trying to fill the gap in why am I being isolated? And usually when it fills the gaps by itself without external information, it usually defaults to, the worst outcome possible. So I walk down the street, I see a person I know, I wave, they don't wave back, I keep walking. My brain is not gonna say, oh, they didn't see me. They're gonna be like, he doesn't like me, because it's filling the gap with the worst possible outcome. So that's another reason why speaking up and talking about this, especially the anger, the frustration, may really help. And to say it in another way, which is slightly different, is that usually we're not hurt by someone else's behavior, but by our own expectation of them. So in the example earlier, I'm not hurt by the fact that people didn't wave back at me, Like it's not like their physical action of moving their arm was hurting me, or like their fact that they didn't do hurt me, but it's that I was expecting them to wave back at me and they didn't live up to that, and now I feel that hurt against that expectation. And that specific way of thinking about this is one of the things that unlocked for me like so much less pain. It was a revelation for me. I loved learning about that.
Yeah, there is one more thing about filling the gaps. Like we keep suggesting each other new things, but like don't leave the gaps. Like if you are having a chat with an email with someone, an email exchange, and you are left out frustrated, switch to chat. Have a chat with them. And if that also gives you some sense that the person is hiding something from you or not telling you what they feel about what you're saying, call them. Video call them. If you can, meet them in person, like escalate things, because, well, sometimes you're not going to be able to meet them in person, but a video call gives you their facial expression, and that helps you pacify yourself with your expectations. Like in this case, most of the things that you folks wrote are questions directed to us. That gave us context, but not too much. Like maybe we answered your questions completely wrongly and we didn't live up to your expectations because we didn't understand them. If you were here in this call, I'm pretty sure we would. So try to leave fewer gaps. If you start feeling frustrated, reduce the gaps. So sometimes it's going to be expensive, yeah, it's going to be sometimes frustrating, sure, but it's going to help you and your team a lot if you get the habit of escalating media, not to the manager. Like if a colleague of yours send you something hurtful, don't immediately escalate to the manager, call them and try to understand if that's what they meant, especially if there is a language barrier. Like I used to work with people that didn't have English as their native language. Most of my team was like that. And sometimes we had problems just because of that. People used a word that meant something bad they didn't know that they did. So even if it's just because of that, just call, talk to them.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I want to add more things, but I also don't want this to end up being 2 hours long. So yes, what Roberto was just saying, like talk with people by voice, by video. It's great to reduce these type of frictions, this type of like fill in the gaps. Your brain is most likely wrong or is missing out on some context. Now, I wanted to move to the question number 5, which is our last question. And by the way, thanks everyone who submitted these questions. They are great. And I hope that what we were able to say, again, like maybe we really did mess up your intention. I really hope that you were able to take something out of it. But yeah, I think this question is a great one to finish on. And it's a bit long, so bear with me. I'll try to read it through and I hope that I'll not mess it up. So, hi, thank you for your initiative. You're welcome. Usually, the advice given to people who end up in a toxic environment is to resign and change jobs. There are some cases in which you can't simply resign and change job. For instance, if you're doing a PhD, you could discover too late that your advisor is bad, either because they don't care about you or because they don't value your time and your work. Moreover, it might happen that you work with people that you don't like and that doesn't help you in any way. In this case, resigning from this job would mean giving up the PhD. This could be bad, especially if you're in the middle of your PhD. You're stuck in a situation where you feel bad, but if you leave, you wasted 2 years of your life. And if you stay, you will have at least another year of suffering ahead of you. What do you think about cases where resignation is not possible and you have to endure and overcome a long period of great stress? What could be good things to decrease the suffering in these cases? So, for this very last part of the question, look at the things we said earlier. Basically, we try to give a comprehensive list of tips and suggestions that may help you deal with situation where like your things are out of your control. They just have to live through it. For the first part of the question, which is like resignation is not possible. How do you endure this period of stress? I feel like I've wasted 2 years if I leave. There are two main things I want to touch on here, and probably are not what you're expecting. The reader / person that wrote the questioner. The first one is, and I'm gonna like turn it on us. I'm going to call it a reality check. So first off, we're doing this video, this recording. We're like two software engineers that we work at big techs. We worked at big techs. Like we have relatively like high-paying jobs. We are healthy. We're like in our 30s. We're like in a phase of our life where a lot of things are good for us. So if you're listening to this, maybe we're assuming like, oh yeah, changing job is easy, or like, oh, you can just like buy an Apple Watch to, have a sleep tracker. And for us, it's like maybe normalized because we live in this industry where people have certain, payrolls. And I wanted to first do a reality check on that. Like sometimes, some other roles, other areas, like the things that we're saying may not apply because you may not have control on some of the things that we perceive as things that you have control over, like your job, like in this situation, the PhD. So, like first off, always listen to yourself, understand what you have control over and what you don't. Like, don't feel bad if some of our suggestions are things that don't apply to you. It's probably our fault in not being able to think broadly enough. Okay, so this is the first reality check I wanted to do. The second reality check is instead for the person writing this question, which is it really that bad? Like also like the question that Roberto was asking earlier, like if you don't do this, what's the emergency situation? Like, is it really that bad, the situation you're in? Okay, so let me try to clarify a bit. Try asking yourself what could go wrong. So if you're doing a PhD, this means that you've done your master's degree, and usually that comes right after it, right? So probably you're like in your 20s, your mid 20s. Probably that means that also like you don't have a family, you don't have responsibilities outside of yourself. So wasting those 2 years, well, maybe it's not the worst thing in the world. Maybe, you having learned all of this throughout these 2 years is enough of a learning experience for you that you can actually drop out of the PhD. If all that changes that you will have to start a new PhD with better people that you realize and understand right away, like the flags that tell you, okay, this is a better place to be in, maybe those 2 years are worth the change. Try to put things into perspective. Like, where are you in your life? Is it really that bad? If you're doing a PhD, again, probably again, I go back to relatively young, but one of the things that you learn when you start working, and for me was like very eye-opening, is that when I started working, it wasn't like, oh, we're all at the same age, we all finished our degrees and we started working, so we're more or less all in the same age range. So we all start like, I don't know, at 25 as a junior software engineer. Like, the world is so much bigger than what you've experienced so far when you enter the industry, when you start working. And when I learned that, and like, hey, I have a colleague that is like 19 and they're like so much better than me, sometimes I even felt like, oh, maybe uni wasn't the best idea for me. But no, I still like having done uni. But like putting things in perspective and realizing that the paths in life are much broader than what you may be seeing right now. You're seeing, oh, PhD is the only thing I can do, and if I didn't do it in these 3 years, my life is over. No, most likely it's not over. Like, even if you drop out of it and start a new one, it could be that nothing will change. You will enter, I don't know, maybe after a PhD we will start doing some jobs and you're going to be 28 while a colleague is going to be 25, a colleague is going to be 20, or maybe everyone is going to be in their 40s. Like, life is so much broader and everyone has their own path. So don't try to put yourself into a very, very like tight funnel that like, oh, if I fail this, I'm a failure, because it's very likely not that. So yeah, this is, again, like, try to put things into perspective. Ask yourself, what could go wrong? Again, maybe you're this person that actually has other responsibilities, and living the PhD actually affects other people, so you actually are forced to keep going. And if that's the case, then again, listen to the things we said earlier, like try to find ways to manage the situation and deal through it. At least you know that, you know, in a year it will be over, which for some other situation it might not be that. But also try to put things into perspective. And one side tip that I will give you with this is a concept, which is the sunk cost fallacy. And basically, this is something that your brain does to us that makes us risk averse. And what this means is, for example, if I'm in a bad situation and leaving it for a better situation means leaving something behind, my brain is against that. My brain is trying to keep me where I'm at because it's the situation that I know. So, for example, this is a situation when you go to the slot machines, you start playing and you keep losing. At that point, at the fourth, fifth play, your brain is telling you, well, you've already lost 3. You need to keep going, because if you stop, you basically lost everything. So you're gonna keep trying, and that's like one of the tricks that they use in casinos and etc. to keep you playing. Like the sunk cost fallacy is very powerful, and I would recommend, like, maybe you can read a bit about it. We're gonna leave some links in the description. Like, it could be that your situation feels this like inescapable also because of this sunk cost fallacy. And yeah, I hope that this may maybe help you have a bit of a better perspective on what you're dealing with right now. Roberto, what do you think?
So, very strong opinion as earlier. I think PhDs are burnout factories, because the reasons for burnouts are mainly 2: the stakes at play. If it was super easy for everybody to just change jobs, no one would burn out. At the first moment of stress, you would just switch to a different job. Who cares, right? So the higher the stakes, the higher the chance, the likelihood that you will burn out. And in this case, PhDs have a very high stakes, because again, sometimes you change, you lose 2 years. Sometimes you can't change. Sometimes your parents are paying for it and you would feel super guilty for dropping out. It's like, there are many things that make it so much easier to burn out during PhDs. And also, it's a quite strict cage. Like, most people that I know that did a PhD had a project tailored for them. If they stopped working on it, that would just die and they wouldn't have another place to go to. So all of these makes it super hard. So if the person writing this question is feeling like the PhD is making them burn out, my answer is, it probably is. It is for everyone. Everybody that I know that did a PhD went through a lot of stress. So you are like, feel validated. I'm validating you. I'm authorizing you to feel like that. It's not just you, it's most people in your situation. So this is the first thing that I wanted to say. The other parts are, first, I dropped out. Like, I started my master's, I couldn't finish it. I just couldn't bring myself to invest that amount of time and energy in something that didn't give me any satisfaction. Did it affect my career? Yes, positively, because I started working earlier. So did it really affect me? Yes. Would I suggest everybody to drop out or not take their masters? Of course not. But for me, it was a positive change. So this is survivorship bias, like the definition of it, but still, is not necessarily a bad thing. Like, a PhD in a certain way is still a job. Like, you can always put on your CV that you worked for 2 years on a specific subject. It's still gonna count somewhat towards your goals. And I think it's better to be someone that understood the situation was bad and saying, I was doing research on this, I had to stop because the situation became too unfavorable. Rather than having something on your CV and being completely burnout and hate your job and just open a bakery. Like, if you like to code, stay there, but keep liking it. Like, I dropped out and it helped me. Maybe this is not the case for you, but think about it this way. And this thing has a name, this concept has a name. How much worse does it need to be for you to drop out? Like, what could possibly happen that makes you decide, okay, this is too much? Because if you can't think of anything, you're already there. It's already too bad. So consider this. Yes, you might want to still finish it, but also it might not be worth it for the cost on your mental health. It feels to me like many people in your situation don't factor in their mental health, while deciding to keep doing the PhD. You're highly educated, you already have a master's probably. You will probably have an easy time finding job if you work in our field, which I think you do because you asked the question on the forum. So yeah, consider that you're already in a good spot to start searching for a job. So maybe don't quit already, search for a job, see what they offer you, and compare the alternative. Have a real, concrete alternative to compare with what you're currently doing. A PhD, after all, at the end of the day, it's also a job. So start to treat it that way. So this is a heap of information and may help you. I didn't do a PhD personally again, but during my master's I felt what you're describing, and dropping out was not an easy decision, but it's something that in hindsight was good for me. It was super hard, especially explaining it to my parents, but yeah, I mean, I did that and I had exactly the career that I wanted. I was studying to get a degree, to have the career that I managed having without that degree. So yeah, maybe it's also your case.
Yeah, totally. In tech in particular, like I think that especially we're both Italians. In Italy, you really feel the pressure always to at least get to your master degree before you start working, and then you get into tech, which is a very like broad. You get to meet people from all around the world, and you realize that a lot of people entered it without, maybe even never going to into university, and they're super smart, super good, and they have 5 years of advantage over you. So it's tech is a very like low barrier to entry industry, and you don't need maybe like again context and like trying to get a broader perspective sometimes helps, but also as Roberto was saying, like dropping out for him was a good thing, but that's only something that you can understand looking back. So there's no good choices. There are only choices that we made, and then how we live through them. Yeah, well, you cannot predict the future, but
Right.
hopefully, maybe we helped you, like at least not ended up in a future where you're burned out in a year, and you're gonna feel super bad, and maybe you're gonna need like professional to help deal through that. Not that you only need a therapist when you get to a bad place. I would love for everyone that is listening to this to get a therapist today, even if they don't feel like they need it, because it's very likely that you would need it anyway.
I
But yeah,
second that.
I think that basically that was like my perfect like final thought about this recording. I don't want to call it an episode because it's not an episode or something, unless people like it. Maybe we do it again. But yes, I would say like thanks everyone for submitting your questions. My final thought about this, and the thing that I really hope that some of you can take out of it, is like take care of your mental health. Roberto, what are your final thoughts about it?
Yeah, definitely take care of your mental health, which comes first. You can't pour from an empty cup. Keep that in mind. You can't keep pouring and pouring from your energy. They're gonna run out. And listen to the people around you, because sometimes they will see your situation with clearer minds and eyes than you can. Like for me, the decision of dropping out was greatly helped by the person that is now my partner. And without them, I think I would have suffered through a lot more. So listen to the people around you, the people that really care about you. They can probably give you some understanding from an outside perspective. So yeah, definitely that. Oh, and
Absolutely.
do therapy. Like if you're
Go to the
wondering,
therapist.
should I get a therapist? The answer is yes. If you're asking yourself that question, it's probably already late.
Yeah, and of course, again, like therapy is an expense, especially if you're like going privately and everything. But we hope that like there are some resources, some links. There are certain charities, certain projects that can help if you don't have the means. And I really hope that you will be able to find a solution that works for you, that will help you to get to a path towards better mental health. But anyway, I think that this wraps up our conversation. Roberto, thank you so much for being here. Like your perspectives have been awesome. I love bouncing back and forth with you because we keep like coming up with new things, and I really hope that people were able to take out something
Likewise.
good from our conversation. And yeah, I hope that this video gave you some new insights into how to deal with your own mental health challenges, especially in the tech industry. And remember that you're not alone. There are resources available and people that can support you. We're leaving some links in the description. If you enjoyed this chat, of course, this video should be on YouTube. I hope that it's going to be on YouTube. So, do the usual YouTube things, the thumbs up, the, comments, the sharing, the subscribe. I'm not going to promise anything. I really enjoyed this, but we'll see how it turns out. Thank you so much for watching so far. This is an important topic. I'm really passionate about it. Roberto is really passionate about it. World Mental Health Day is hopefully the day you're watching this or after that, so October 10th, 2023. Maybe we're going to make more content in the future related to mental health. Until then, take care of yourself and each other. Bye for now.
Bye.